Namaskar. Dear viewers, welcome to the lecture series on food technology. Today, the topic poultry will be discussed under the following headings. 1. Introduction. 2. Different types of poultry. 3. Poultry farming. 4. Poultry as food. And at last, 5th, health and diseases with respect to humans. Introduction. Poultry are domesticated birds reared by humans for the eggs they produce, their meat, their feathers, or sometimes as pets. These birds are most typical members of the order Galliformes, which includes chickens, quails, and turkeys, commonly known as waterfowl, and including domestic ducks and domestic geese. Poultry also includes other birds that are killed for their meat, such as the young pigeons, but does not include similar wild birds hunted for sports or food. Poultry is the second most widely eaten type of meat globally, and along with eggs provides nutritionally beneficial food containing high quality protein accompanied by a low proportion of fat. All poultry meat should be properly handled and sufficiently cooked in order to reduce the risk of food poisoning. The domestication of poultry took place several thousand years ago. Selective breeding for fast growth, egg-laying ability, conformation, plumage, and docility took place over the centuries, and modern breeds often look very different from their wild ancestors. Let us see different types of poultry. First, chickens. Chickens are medium-sized chunky birds with an upright stance and characterized by fleshy red combs and wattles on their heads. Males, known as cocks, are usually larger and boldly colored and have more exaggerated plumage than females. They are called hens. Chicken are gregarious, omnivorous, ground-dwelling birds that in their natural surroundings search among the leafy litter for seeds, invertebrates, and other small animals. Today's domestic chicken is mainly descended from the wild red jungle fowl of Asia, with some additional input from the grey jungle fowl. Domestication is believed to have taken place between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago, and what we are thought to be fossilized chicken bones have been found in northeastern China dated to around 5400 BC. Archaeologists believe domestication was originally for the purpose of cockfighting, the male bird being a doughty fighter. By 4000 years ago, chickens seem to have reached the Indus Valley, and 250 years later they arrived in Egypt. They were still used for fighting and were regarded as symbols of fertility. Since then, the keeping of chickens has spread around the world for the production of food, with the domestic fowl being a valuable source of both eggs and meat. By the mid-20th century, the poultry meat produced industry was of greater importance than the egg-laying industry. Poultry breeding has produced breeds and strains to fulfill different needs. Light-framed egg-laying birds that can produce 300 eggs a year, fast-growing fleshy birds destined for consumption at a young age, and utility birds which produce both an acceptable number of eggs and a well-fleshed carcass. Male birds are unwanted in the egg-laying industry and can often be identified as soon as they are hatched for subsequent culling. In meat breeds, the birds are sometimes castrated, often chemically, to prevent aggression. The resulting bird, called capon, has more tender and flavorful meat as well. Second one, ducks. Ducks are medium-sized aquatic birds with broad bills, eyes on the side of the head, fairly long neck, short legs set far back on the body and webbed feet. Males, known as drakes, are often larger than females, simply known as ducks, and are differently colored in some breeds. Domestic ducks are omnivorous, eating a variety of animal and plant materials such as aquatic insects, mollusks, worms, small amphibians, water weeds, and grasses. They feed in shallow water by dabbling with their heads underwater and their tails upended. Most domestic ducks are too heavy to fly, and they are social birds, preferring to live and move around together in groups. They keep their plumage waterproof by preening, a process that spreads the secretions of the preen gland over their feathers. Domestication of the duck took place in the Far East at least 1,500 years earlier than in the West. Despite this, ducks did not appear in agricultural texts in Western Europe until about 810 AD, when they began to be mentioned alongside geese, chickens, and peafowl as being used for rental payments made by tenants to landowners. It is widely agreed that the mallard, Anas palintrochus, is the ancestor of all breeds of domestic duck, with the exception of the Muscovy duck, Carina mascheta, which is not closely related to other ducks. Ducks are farmed mainly for their meat and eggs. As is the case with chickens, various breeds have been developed selected for egg laying ability, fast growth, and a well covered carcass. The most common commercial breed in the United Kingdom and the United States is the Pekin duck, which can lay 200 eggs a year and can reach a weight of 3.5 kg in 44 days. The grey-lag goose, Anser anser, was domesticated by the Egyptian at least 3000 years ago, and a different wild species, the swan goose, Anser cygnoides, domesticated in Siberia about 1,000 years later, is known as a Chinese goose. The two hybridize with each other, and a large knob at the base of the beak, a noticeable feature of the Chinese goose, is present to a varying extent in these hybrids. The hybrids are fertile and have resulted in several of the modern breeds. Despite their early domestication, geese have never gained the commercial importance of chickens and ducks. Domestic geese are much larger than their wild counterparts and tend to have thick necks, an upright posture, and large bodies with broad rear ends. The grey-lag derived birds are large and fleshy and used for meat, while the Chinese geese have smaller frames and are mainly used for egg production. The forage on grass and weeds, supplementing this with small invertebrates, and one of the attractions of rearing geese are their ability to grow and thrive on a grass-based system. They are very gregarious and have good memories and can be allowed to roam widely in the knowledge that they will return home back by dusk. The Chinese goose is more aggressive and noisy than other geese and can be used as a guard animal to warn of intruders. The meat of geese is dark colored and high in protein, but they deposit fat subcutaneously, although this fat contains mostly monounsaturated fatty acids. The birds are killed either around 10 or about 24 weeks. In some countries, geese and ducks are force-fed to produce livers with an exceptionally high fat content for the production of foie gras. Over 75% world population of this product occurs in France, with lesser industries in Hungary and Bulgaria, and a growing production in China. But the process of feeding the birds in this way is banned in many countries on animal welfare grounds. Coming to turkeys, male domesticated turkey sexually displaying by showing the snoot hanging over the beak, the caruncles hanging from the throat, the bird of small black stiff feathers on the chest. Turkeys are large birds, their nearest relatives being the pheasant and the guinea fowl. Males are larger than females and have spreading fan-shaped tails and distinctive fleshy wattles called a snoot that hang from the top of the beak and are used in courtship display. Wild turkeys can fly, but seldom to do so, preferring to run with a long startling gait. They roost in trees and forage on the ground, feeding on seeds, nuts, berries, grass, foliage, invertebrates, lizards, and even small snakes. The modern domesticated turkey is descended from one of 6 subspecies of wild turkey, Meleagris gallopava, found in the present Mexican states. Pre-Aztec tribes in south central Mexico first domesticated the bird around 800 BC. The Pueblo Indians inhabiting the Colorado Plateau in the United States did likewise around 200 BC. They used the feathers for robes, blankets, and ceremonial purposes. More than 1000 years later, they became an important food source. The first Europeans to encounter the bird misidentified it as a guinea fowl, a bird known as a turkey fowl at that time because it had been introduced into Europe via Turkey. Commercial turkeys are usually reared indoors under controlled conditions. These are often large buildings purpose-built to provide ventilation and low light intensities. This reduces the bird's activity and thereby increases the rate of weight gain. The lights can be switched on for 24 hours a day or a range of stepwise light regimens to encourage the birds to feed often and therefore grow rapidly. Females achieve slaughter weight at about 15 weeks of age and males at about 19 weeks. Mature commercial birds may be twice as heavy as their wild counterparts. Many different breeds have been developed, but the majority of commercial birds are white, as this improves the appearance of the dressed carcass, the pin feathers being less visible. Quail. The quail is a small to medium sized cryptically colored bird. In its natural environment, it is found in bushy places, in rough grassland among agricultural crops, in other places with dense cover. It feeds on seeds, insects, and other small invertebrates. Being a largely ground-dwelling gregarious bird, domestication of the quail was not difficult, although many of its wild instincts are retained in captivity. It migrated across Egypt in vast flocks, and the bird could sometimes be picked up off the ground by hand. These were the common quail, Coturnix coturnix, but modern domesticated flocks are mostly of Japanese quail, Coturnix japonica, which was probably domesticated as early as the 11th century AD in Japan. They were originally kept as songbirds, and they are thought to have been regularly used in song contexts. In the early 20th century, Japanese breeders began to selectively breed for increased egg production. By 1940, the quail egg industry was flourishing, but the events of World War II led to the complete loss of quail lines bred for their song type, as well as almost all those bred for egg production. After the war, the few surviving domesticated quail were used to rebuild the industry, and all current commercial and laboratory lines are considered to have originated from this population. Modern birds can lay around 300 eggs a year, and countries such as Japan, India, China, Italy, Russia and the United States have established commercial Japanese quail farming industries. Japanese quails are also used in biomedical research such as genetics, embryology, nutrition, physiology, pathology and toxicity studies. These quail are closely related to the common quail, and many young hybrid birds are released into the wild each year to replenish dwindling wild populations. Other poultry, guinea fowl originated in southern Africa, and the species most often kept as poultry in the helmeted guinea fowl. It is a medium sized grey or speckled bird with a small necked head with colorful wattles and the knob on top, and was domesticated by the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans. Guinea fowls are hardy, sociable birds that subsist mainly on insects but also consume grasses and seeds. They will keep a vegetable garden clear of pests and will eat the ticks that carry Lyme disease. They happily roost in trees and give a loud vocal warning of the approach of predators. Their flesh and eggs can be eaten in the same way as chickens, young birds being ready for the table at the age of about 4 months. A squab is the name given to the young of domestic pigeons that are destined for the table. Like other domesticated pigeons, birds used for this purpose are descended from the rock pigeon, that is Columba livia. Special utility breeds with desirable characteristics are used. 2 eggs are laid and incubated for about 17 days. When they hatch, the squabs are fed by both parents on pigeon's milk, a thick secretion high in protein produced by the crop. Squabs grow rapidly but are slow to fledge and are ready to leave the nest at 26 to 30 days, weighing about 500 grams. By this time, the adult pigeons will have laid and be incubating another pair of eggs, and a prolific pair should produce 2 squabs every 4 weeks during a breeding season lasting several months. Coming to poultry farming, worldwide more chickens are kept than any other type of poultry, with over 50 billion birds being raised each year as a source of meat and eggs. Traditionally, such birds would have been kept extensively in small flocks, foraging during the day and housed at night. However, rising world population and urbanization have led to the bulk of production being in larger, more intensive specialist units. These are often situated close to where the feed is grown or near to where the meat is needed, and result in cheap, safe food being made available for urban communities. Profitability of production depends very much on the price of feed, which has been rising. High feed cost could limit further development of poultry production. In free range husbandry, the birds can roam freely outdoors for at least part of the day. Often this is in large enclosures, but the birds have access to natural conditions and can exhibit their normal behaviors. A more intensive system is yarding, in which the birds have access to be fenced yard and poultry house at a higher stocking rate. Poultry can also be kept in a barn system with no access to the open air, but with the ability to move around freely inside the building. The most intensive system for egg-laying chickens is battery cages, often set in multiple tiers. These several birds share a small cage which restrict their ability to move around and behave in a normal manner. The eggs are laid on the floor of the cage and roll into troughs outside for ease of collection. Chickens raised intensively for their meat are known as broilers. Breeds have been developed that can grow to an acceptable carcass size, that is 2 kg, in 6 weeks or less. Broilers grow so fast their legs cannot always support their weight, and their hearts and respiratory systems may not be able to supply enough oxygen to their developing muscles. Mortality rates at 1% are much higher than for less intensively reared laying birds, which take 18 weeks to reach similar weights. Processing the birds is done automatically with conveyor belt efficiency. They are hung by their feet, stunned, killed, bled, plucked, have their heads and feet removed, washed, chilled, drained, weighed and packed, all within the course of little over 2 hours. Let us discuss poultry as food. Poultry is the second most widely eaten type of meat in the world, accounting for about 30% of the total meat production worldwide compared to pork at 38%. 16 billion birds are raised annually for consumption, more than half of these in industrialized, factory-like production units. Global broiler meat production rose to 84.6 million tons in 2013. The largest producers were the United States, that is 20%, China 16.6%, Brazil 15.1% and European Union, that is 11.3%. There are two distinct models of production. The European Union supply chain models seek to supply products which can be traced back to farm of origin. This model faces the increasing cost of implementing additional food safety requirements, welfare issues and environmental regulations. In contrast, the United States models turns the product into a commodity. World production of duck meat was about 4.2 million tons in 2011, with China producing 2/3 of the total, some 1.7 billion birds. Other notable duck producing countries in the Far East include Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Myanmar, Indonesia and South Korea, 12% in total. France 3.5% is the largest producer in the West, followed by other European Union nations, that is 3%, and North America 1.7%. China was also by far the largest producer of goose and guinea fowl meat with a 94% share of the 2.6 million ton global market. Global egg production was expected to reach 65.5 million tons in 2013, surpassing all previous years between 2000 and 2010. Egg production was growing globally at around 2% per year, but since then growth has slowed down to nearer 1%. At last, we will discuss health and diseases with respect to humans. Poultry meat and eggs provide nutritionally beneficial food containing protein of high quality. This is accompanied by low levels of fat, which have a favorable mix of fatty acids. Chicken meat contains about 2 to 3 times as much as polyunsaturated fat as most types of red meat when measured by weight. However, for boneless, skinless chicken breast, the amount is much lower. A 100-gram serving of baked chicken breast contains 4 gram of fat and 31 gram of protein compared to 10 gram of fat and 27 gram of protein for the same portion of the broiled lean skirt steak. A 2011 study by the Translational Genomics Research Institute showed that 47% of the meat and poultry sold in United States grocery stores was contaminated with Staphylococcus aureus, and 52% of the bacteria concerned showed resistance to at least 3 groups of antibiotics. Thorough cooking of the product would kill these bacteria, but a risk of cross contamination from improper handling of the raw product is still present. Also, some risk is present for consumers of poultry meat and eggs to bacterial infections such as Salmonella and Campylobacter. Poultry products may become contaminated by these bacteria during handling, processing, marketing or storage, resulting in foodborne illness if the product is improperly cooked or handled. In general, avian influenza is a disease of birds caused by bird-specific influenza A virus that is not normally transferred to people. However, people in contact with the live poultry are at the greatest risk of becoming infected with the virus, and this is of particular concern in areas such as Southeast Asia, where the disease is endemic in the wild bird population and domestic poultry can become infected. The virus possibly could mutate to become highly virulent and infectious in humans and can cause an influenza pandemic. In conclusion, the poultry industry has become an important economic activity and vital source of livelihood in many countries. In the last 10 years, the consumption of poultry meat has increased rapidly, and it is expected that it will continue to grow in future. Thank you.